Hi, today we are going to talk a little bit about herbs. It's the time of the year in spring when herbs are coming around so that we can plant them in planters, we can plant them in the yard, and then we can use them especially in our cooking because they really do add fragrance to everything that we do with cooking. So what we're going to need today, actually I'm going to show you around which plants we could plant. I mean, there's so many herbs. But I'll show you the tools that we're going to need. I will tell you the definition of an herb, and also tell you a little bit about what herbs actually, in the ancient times, they really used to help people with their medical conditions, and they still can. There's what's called Western medicine, where we use medications, and some of the medications actually originated from herbs. But then there is the alternative medicine, or herbal medicine, that's really used in Asia, in China, in Bhutan, where they actually have Western medicine. Their public medical health is actually Western medicine and also herbal medicine at the same time, and we call that integrative medicine. So integrative medicine, actually in the ancient times, they really did use herbs and then spices, and we'll come to that definition, in their for medical purposes. And Hippocrates, who's really our original medicine man, I call him, they really felt that, you know, food was medicine. And what his biggest quote is really, let food be thy medicine, and let thy medicine be food. Because that's what they had. They really didn't have medications, they didn't have IVs, they didn't have all those things. They used herbs as their medicine. So the tools that we're going to need today, it's not really that many. You can see we need a hammer. Now, why do we need a hammer? But I will explain. A nail. We're going to need a little shovel. And we're going to need some containers. So I brought this container. I brought this container, which can just be an old can. And I brought like an old egg crate, which can also be used just for the seeds. But obviously you can go to the store and they usually have already started the seeding of our herbs, and you can just plant them in your containers, and just all they need is some water and some sun. Some of these herbs, so let me explain a little bit about herbs and spices. So herbs, the definition, and people are going to use them differently, but herbs, the definition is really, they have to have green leaves. And most of the herbs that originated in the Mediterranean, European Mediterranean areas, as bushes or as plants or as, and this is what they look like, they just grow, they're like little bushes. These have a little bit more woodsy in them, but like the basil that you are probably familiar with, they're kind of floppy, not very woody. So I can show you a couple of them. We have parsley over here. We have chives. We have, oh, that's a little one. This is dill, sage, thyme. As you can tell, there's a couple of different varieties, they call it, of thyme or basil or sage or even oregano. Do we do that already? And then you also have lavender, and I'm going to show you the lavender. See, those are the lavenders that were there in the pots, and you say, well, that doesn't look so good. But if you look really closely, there's the new lavender coming up, and then you just give them a haircut, and it starts being beautiful. And this is really the lavender that you can buy in the store. So originally I was going to tell you about the difference between herbs and spices. And herbs are, like we said, the green leafy plants that are originated from mostly the Mediterranean areas and Middle Eastern probably. And then spices are more dried. So, and they can originate from other things. They can originate from bark, they can originate from fruits, they can seeds. And so it's a little bit different, but some people just use them interchangeably. The interesting things about those spices and herbs, they can have, like we talked about when we went and looked at all these herbs, they do have medicinal properties. For example, when you look at a spice like garlic, garlic is very well known to, and it's a root, And it's now shown that it lowers cholesterol and also high blood pressure. So actually in the now Western medicine, people do recommend that for people that have heart disease to use garlic if you tolerate it. And ginger is well known to help with nausea, and people use that for example, pregnant women who have problems with nausea, they can use ginger because medications is usually not recommended. So those are some of the spices that have some medical properties. So let's talk a little bit about the different herbs so that you can decide which ones would work for you. Now let's start with parsley, which is an herb that really came from Central and Northern Europe. It's used in a lot of things. They use it in sauces and salads and omelets. Sometimes they use it as decoration, with a dish because it looks green. As you can tell, there's a different one. There's the flat leaf, and then there's the curly leaf. And there's also a root that you can have that's actually cultivated perfectly for that in Germany, and they use that a lot like a parsnip or a carrot and use it differently. The medicinal properties are really for, they say it helps with kidney health, it reduces blood pressure, it has anti-inflammatory properties and antibacterial properties. And all these green leaves also are going to have vitamins in it that helps you stay healthy. Now, the problem with those, with all these herbs, that it can also have negative effects, right? Because, for example, parsley has high vitamin K, and that can interfere with some medications. So it's always important that you tell your people, especially if you take oils from the herbs that are made from herbs, tell your physician that you're using them because it can interfere with medications. If you just use them in food, you're not going to get the high concentrations of that. Okay, let's go to the thymes. So those are the ones over here. So that's a very hardy shrub from the Mediterranean as well, and there's about 100 varieties. That means 100, they can look different in 100 different ways. They use it in the Western and Middle Eastern cooking a lot, but even in the Creole and Cajun cooking, in stews and casseroles and soups. The French like to use it in wine sauces, gumbos, and jambalayas. The medical properties that you see with thymes are antibacterial, insecticidal, which is important because in those areas you do have malaria as well, possibly antifungal, so you could actually make a tea out of this, and if you have thrush, which is sometimes a coating in within your mouth, people use it and swish and swallow. And it's used for food preservation. It has a property that helps with the preservation of food. And some studies have shown actually that it helps if you use the oil in a skin preparation. It can decrease the signs of eczema. And it also supposedly decreases your blood pressure. Now, all the things with herbs, because it is alternative medicine, not all the things are FDA approved. So you just have to take it with a grain of salt. All right, here we got a mint. And as you can tell, I chose the chocolate mint. There's a reason for that. I love chocolate. So again, this comes from the Mediterranean area. The interesting things about mints is there's kind of the two mints that we know, which is the peppermint and the spearmint. Spearmint is actually mellow and refreshing. It has a sweet and sharp and has more of a lemony undertone. Peppermint has a menthol taste to it. It's a little bit more tangy and spicy, but it leaves you with a great, fresh, cool aftertaste. And as you know, a lot of these spices are used in toothpaste. There you go. So the mint helps actually with indigestion. And when you go to maybe some Eastern countries, they have a lot of mint teas after their meals because it does help with indigestion. It also helps with inflammation. Supposedly it decreases allergies, so probably works on the immune system. And it breaks up phlegm and mucus. So you can make kind of a tea or kind of you know, when you use it oils and you have a vaporizer, it can help you with break up phlegm and mucus. The one things that they do not recommend is when you have GERD. So if you have like acid reflux, supposedly it can make it worse. And here we are at the campfire. And this is where we actually have our little mint patch. And the reason we have a mint patch at campfire, and I just cleaned it out real quick, is because what mint does is helps with the mosquitoes. And there's the little ones that are coming out. And when you smell it, it already smells like mint. And so yes, we use that. We rub the leaves on our skin, and if there's not too many mosquitoes at work, sometimes it needs a little extra help. But this is our mint patch. Here we got chives, and that's actually part of the onion family, the aluminum. And it grows in America and it grows in Europe actually naturally. So you can actually find it in the forest. And yesterday we kind of found it at camp as well. You use chives as an herb. You don't cook it. You use it fresh and you cut it up in salads, for example, you know, like the famous potato salads with chives, soups, and you can use it in omelets. Medicinal properties have shown to help with sleep, with eye health, because it has certain vitamins in the chives, memory, the nervous system, antimicrobial, and they found some anti-tumor cancer properties because there's a lot of folate in chives. And so therefore sometimes also it decreases prematurity and birth defects because folate is important for that. However, some people cannot tolerate onions, so chive might not be the best herb for them. The next herb is going to be sage, and that's actually a shrubby. When we talk about perennial, that means it can grow all year round, but that doesn't mean, but they're talking about a perennial in the Mediterranean. Now, Ohio is not necessarily the same climate as the Mediterranean, so often people bring their herbs back into the house if they have them in a pot, and you can use them over the winter as well, just on a kitchen counter. There's certain ones like the lavender we talked about before, the thyme that will come back, and the chives that will come back, but not all the herbs would in Ohio. So that's just a little side information. Sage aids a lot with a digestion of fatty foods, and that's why people use it in sausages, and that's why we use it also to turkey, right, for Thanksgiving, and pork and things like that. So it's an herb that's being used because of the medicinal properties that it has, which is to help with digestion. But it has also other properties. It helps with skin health. It's actually dental and mouth health as well. So people use it in teas and then drink it, and it helps with canker sores, if you have any of those, which are very painful. It can lower blood glucose, lowers bad cholesterol, it boosts your immunity, it improves some mental health performance, and it can help also with congestion. So a lot of the old ancient medicines came from sage. Rosemary, which actually, besides using it for cooking, actually rosemary smells really good. And one of the reasons we have an herb garden at camp is because you can touch the herbs and squeeze the herbs and kind of have all these different smells that makes you actually feel good. And rosemary is one of those. And we talked about lavender before too. And those are really nice smells to just, you know, get your senses going. So rosemary is also from the Mediterranean region. Their leaves are used in stews and in marinades. As you can tell, they become a little bit more woody. So you might have to just take off the leaves and then chop them up a little bit. But you do that usually right before you start cooking so that it has the best fragrance. The medical properties that you can use with that, it alleviates muscle pains. It also improves memory. That's because most of these green leaf herbs have the same vitamins and properties, but sometimes they do different things. It boosts the immune and circulatory system, and it promotes hair growth, and that's because it has vitamin B's in it. The next one is the oregano and marjoram family, which is part of the mint family, which is interesting because even rosemary is part of the mint family, but it doesn't look like mint at all. But the mint family is a huge family with all kinds of different plants. Those are bushy perennials, so they grow as a bush in Western Asia, but obviously also in the Mediterranean. They're used in Italian sauces. The Greek use it on baked fish, and I'm not sure I'm saying it right, but Slovakis. And in Mexico, they use it in their bean dishes, burritos, taco fillings, and they also use it in different salsas. Oregano is a more peppery lemon taste, and the marjoram is more of a sweet and spicy taste. So whatever you like best, you use the different ones. What it does, it actually fights bacteria and it relieves inflammation. It regulates blood sugars and lipids, and it can fight cancers as well. So all these herbs have those properties. Hey, this is Barb again, and we're talking about herbs today. And this is our herb garden at camp. It's not looking too great today. So what we're gonna do, and this is the perfect time to do it, is in the spring, is get rid of all the old stuff. The old stuff protected all the young stuff, but now we need to get rid of it so we can start identifying what herbs we're gonna have. Whew, that was a lot of work, but look, it looks a lot better, and we found a couple things. Now this smells like onions, but it doesn't look like chives though. This is lamb's ear, so that one is pretty easy to check. And then the other ones are gonna grow, and then we'll find some, but we also find things that weren't herbs. And I don't know how they got in here, but look, we got a tulip. It's really spring. And then we also find little creatures that probably were here last year. And that looks like a little rabbit hole. To be continued. There is an interesting plant in the United States and Canada that lives in the forest, which is called the mandrake or the maya apple, or actually they call it the ground lemon. And that plant is originally it's toxic. It can be very toxic if you use it, but the Native Americans used it also because of their medical properties. But you really had to know what you were doing. Just like sometimes you mushrooms, you have to know which mushrooms to eat and what part of the fruit or what part of the plant you can eat or not eat. And from this plant, they actually extracted a component that is now used in cancer treatment. So they knew there was something good about it, but if you eat too much of it or too much, so keep it in moderation. And that's like anything else, that you need to keep it in moderation. So even with the herbs, when you extract the oils can be toxic because it's so concentrated. So, but the herbs, if you use them in cooking, you should be just fine unless you can't tolerate it. There's another interesting plant, which is camphor, and you're probably familiar with that. You use the leaves. And right now, as a medication, people use it in rubs because it helps clearing phlegm or against a cough. And one of the biggest one that we're using now is Vicks Vapor Rub or Blistex that have the camphor extracts of this plant. And so they're really used in Western medicine. There are also, interestingly, medications that originate from plants and molds and things that live in nature, and one of the famous one is obviously the penicillin, which originated from a mold. thousands of years ago in India and Greece and Egypt, it was known to cure certain infections. And they just used regular molds. They had no idea why that helped. It was really in the late 1800s that Alexander Fleming realized that it wasn't the mold itself that was curing infections, but it was really a byproduct of the mold. And it then got extracted by some other scientists. Their names were Ernst Chain and Howard Florey, and they created a first antibiotic called penicillin that we still use in the 1930s, and which was a great discovery because, as we know, people used to not be able to fight infections. There's the foxglove plant, which is also a plant. It's a beautiful flower that can grow in your garden. It is toxic, except that there is a component of that plant that they identified as digoxin, which is an antiarrhythmic drug that is being used in atrial fibrillation or atrial flutter, and it was derived from this beautiful plant. All right, like we said before, now we're gonna plant some herbs. We can do it from seed. We have the little package that you can buy, or you can already have the planted herbs that people have done for you. If you are going to plant from seeds, there's definitely instructions that you should follow. They have instructions of when you can seed outside, and usually it's about a month before the frost. And in Ohio, the last frost, and in Ohio, that date is usually around May 9th, May 11th. So this is a good time to put your seeds out already in the garden. But if you want to start earlier, you can do it in-house, because herbs are really a great thing, especially over the winter, to keep them in your house as well. You can seed them in any container. It's very easy. There's just a couple of tricks that I want to show you. If you have an egg crate, you can start your seeds in there, and then you can transplant them in. Make sure you have something underneath it, because the water does go through. But that's actually a good thing. And that comes to the next little trick that we need to know. This is a really fun jar, but there is a problem with it. If you're gonna do it in a jar, you have to make sure that you don't, it needs water, but you can't overwater it, because your roots are gonna rot. And that's why we come to the next one, where we have just a pot that you can, a can. But what you want to do is put little holes in it, in the bottom, so it can drain. So don't put this on your beautiful dining table, because it will drain water through. But that's what the herbs like. They like a soil that's wet, but they don't like it when it's sitting in the water. So this helps to drain the water out. That's why you want to put it underneath on something that's not going to ruin it. Then you have the little seeds. You can see the little seeds over here. They're teeny, tiny, tiny. And some of the instructions are you can have 3 seeds in 8 inches, which is difficult to do. So I usually take a pinch and kind of put them together. And then when you look, when it starts germinating, which is usually around 6 to 10 days, you start little plants seeing, and if it's too crowded, you just take a couple plants out so that the other ones can grow. Once they have, a couple of ones growing, like 3 or 4, then you can transplant them in your bigger containers. I never talked to you about, for example, basil and dill, and I'm going to give you a little challenge and see if you can figure out what those medical properties are. Basil is really one of the favorite herbs that people have been using, especially the Italians, and I use it all the time. And it grows really quickly, and so it's a great herb to have. The little trick about that one is when you want to use it and you want to cut it, you want to cut it right above. You don't want to let it grow too high. You want to start cutting it right above the new little leaves so that it can bush out. And then you get more of a bushy plant, and you'll have a bigger plant that you'll enjoy. It smells really good. Last but not least, love the Mother Earth and your own mother.